The opening bell back with you this week on a fight week as well, as Wood and Warrington into the mid to late 30s are going to go at it again after a bit of a hiatus and indeed a little bit of time out of the ring between the pair of them as well. Barrios, Ryan Garcia and a big bill over in the States as well. It's the heavyweights that take centre stage this week with the Fury Makhmudov initial presser, kick-starting their Netflix extravaganza, and such a litany of familiar news lines following Fury wherever he goes. So we'll talk about that. Wardley, Dubois are going to be facing off. That's a good fight, isn't it? That's a fight in May in Manchester. And sticking with the heavyweights, close to Matt's heart, Smokin Bert, perhaps in his pomp back in the mid to late 1980s. We're going to talk about Smokin Bert facing off against another prospect up in Canada. That's coming up from this week in history. So lots to get our teeth into. Thanks for joining us for the ride once again. Matthew Christie, Matty boy, how was your weekend?
It's good. Another good weekend. I enjoyed it. I had my mum round for some roast potato sampling. And yeah, it was good. King Edward's this week, by the way. King Edward's.
Yep. Of course.
But anyway, let's get a move on. Let's get through all of this modern day nonsense and get on to Smokin Bert.
Yeah, Smokin Bert against Willie de Witt. A 21-year-old Smokin Bert, absolutely full of the business, and importantly, the TV execs, the CBS crowds starting to get excited about Smokin Bert. So yeah, we're right at the very start. So Matt, I love that. Coming up a bit later on. Heavyweight news lines aplenty. The Fury Makhmudov presser yesterday, as we record this on a Tuesday morning. You sat through all of that. I've seen bits and pieces. As ever, you've got to wade through plenty of gunk to get to the deeply planted gems, haven't you, with Fury and entourage and family? But there were a few little gems, regardless of what you thought about this whole media hype, promotional hype, largely about what Makhmudov is or isn't, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching it. We had Tom Ivers head to the press conference from where he lives, fair old trek down to London, to be told that your name's not down, son, you're not coming in. So Tom Ivers wasn't allowed into the press conference, but it appears that an awful lot of other people were. But it seems like the old boxing scene. I don't really know what to call it. We still cover everything that these particular people are producing with a straight bat, but we're not allowed in still to even a press conference to promote Tyson Fury's return, which I know Tyson Fury is very good at promoting himself. But one would think, given that it's a big stadium, given that it's going to be on Netflix, given that they want as many views on it as possible, they might want to have the website that generates the most page views in the industry there to cover it as well. But anyway, we did it, and we did it from YouTube. So by the time I started watching YouTube, Carl Froch was kind of saying, "Oh, John Fury's in a funny mood today," or something along those lines. And I hadn't picked up on any of the ranting and raving on the sidelines. But in answer to kind of Makhmudov, yes, you're being told that Makhmudov has got dynamite in both hands. He's the most dangerous comeback opponent for any fighter since Marvin Hagler greeted Sugar Ray Leonard out of retirement in 1987. And yeah, he's a solid level comeback opponent, perfectly good comeback opponent, but not exactly. It's not like Sugar Ray Leonard going in against Marvin Hagler. Let's be frank here. You know, Makhmudov was a good amateur. He was a really well-regarded prospect in the professional ranks, but his two biggest bouts, one might even use the word exposed. He's been stopped on 2 occasions, and he has rebounded, and he's beaten Dave Allen over 12 rounds. But Tyson Fury was fairly honest, really, in his assessment of Makhmudov, even though he was very respectful throughout. I thought Tyson Fury largely, but he said for Makhmudov going from fighting Dave Allen to fighting Tyson Fury is like having a little paddle in the garden pond and then attempting to swim the Atlantic in bad weather, which is pretty accurate, I think, if Tyson Fury is the fighter that he was when we last saw him.
And I think also with Fury, Matt, you know what he's like, but the so good at the psychological warfare earlier on in his career, either off the cuff, ad-libbed, or pre-motivated, pre-thought out, pre-intended, whichever it is. And I think there's probably a flavour of both, as ever with Fury, probably more off the cuff than premeditated. But you know with Fury that the body language and the interaction with an opponent, I think it tells its own story, doesn't it? You think back to all the stuff with Wilder, Dosser, and the aggression and the intimidation, the constant verbal sparring. You've seen it with other opponents where it might be a smile, a warm handshake. It was a little tickle of the tummy with Makhmudov, wasn't it? The other day.
It was.
And again, it tells you where Fury's at and how he views this.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think quietly he's exceptionally confident he's going to win this fight, as he should be. And we have seen him get under the skin of opponents. Deontay Wilder comes to mind as one who he really tied in knots psychologically. Dillian Whyte was another one. Dillian Whyte seemed to struggle with what to do with Tyson Fury pre-fight. Your end of the scale, of course, is Alexander Usyk, who always seemed remarkably amused by Tyson Fury attempting to get under his skin. And we saw what happened in those two fights, which Tyson Fury yesterday said he's still deep down, he's convinced he won them. And if that's the way he gets over that psychologically, the fact that he was beaten twice, and the vast majority of people who saw those fights thought he lost both of them, if the way that he can get over that is to convince himself that he won them, then that's fine. He looked remarkably well. He said puts that down largely to spending the last 8 weeks out in Thailand. He says the sun every day makes him happy in a way that waking up in Morecambe and he opens the curtains and it's raining and it's miserable and it's cold does not. And he's got another 8 weeks of training to go, and he's saying he's going to be in excellent shape. This is par for the course for any press conference. This is what fighters say. But Fury does seem to be in a good place psychologically. But the whole John Fury nonsense it's draining, and you would think, given the stage and platform that this fight is on, Netflix and the big stadium, that if John Fury can't behave himself, if he can't run around shouting, trying to call people out, keep him out of there. I don't care what anybody says. That's not a good look for boxing. I know the people that were following him around with cameras for their YouTube channels will have been over the moon that'll get a lot of views. John Fury loses his temper again. But for the sport of boxing, we're trying to present something a little bit more tasteful, given the nature of the sport, given how brutal it is. I think the sport really has to be on its best behaviour at all of the times. And John Fury is never on his best behaviour. The man just drives me around the bend. He really does.
Yeah, it's frustrating and disappointing, isn't it? Yeah, you get the sense with John Fury that he's basically desperate to get himself a seemingly or desirable big payday in one of those kind of YouTube faux celebrity fights where they say he's tried it with Mike Tyson, hasn't it? He was trying it with Carl Froch the other day. I assume that's what he's after. I think that's the gist of it. If it's not just his own kind of character defaults raising their ugly head.
This is a guy that was kind of a decent level domestic heavyweight, but I think he lost 4 fights. The last 2 fights he had in the early 1990s, he's knocked out by Henry Akinwanda and Steve Garber. Don't get me wrong, if he was come running at me like he was running around that press conference yesterday, I would turn and I wouldn't look back. I would not want to be anywhere near that guy when he's in that kind of mood. But then, he was up on the stage, and within seconds of it starting, he then stood up and said, no, this isn't for me to sit here. This is about you, Tyson, and Spence only called Spencer Brown up to take his place up on the top table, and John Fury just kind of disappeared into the crowd. I did wonder at that point if there is some self-awareness in there. If he was thinking, well, I'm in this kind of mood, maybe I need to take myself away from centre stage for a moment. But you know, the fact that really was the biggest headline from a press conference yesterday announcing a heavyweight fight it says so much about Fury, about the media, that it's beyond frustrating.
Exactly. That's the thing. That's the thing. And seeing that sort of entourage of YouTubers and kids carrying cameras, you know, with smiles on their faces, following Fury around, John, that is, following him around, you just think, oh, and you know, we're spending too much time talking about it as well. But let's not forget all that sort of bully boy blustering, and yeah, who knows what there is to it, and who knows what meaning there is to it as well. But you just catch your minds back to the build up to one of the U6 fights, don't you? And he goes after the smallest member of U16, and it basically tries to sucker punch him when he's not even looking. It still comes off worse there. It's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's not good for any of us. It is certainly no good for him. But who knows? Who knows? And hopefully less of that as the thing goes on. As regards Fury, he had that gem of a line regarding context about the danger that Makhmudov presents, notwithstanding their heavyweights, and it's a fight, and that's always in the air. But good context there from Fury, and a beautiful line. You had a couple of other lines from Fury about essentially why he's coming back. And I don't think we really need to wonder why. Fury needs boxing. He can't stay away from it. That's essentially why. He is in love with the sport, and he's in love with the attention and the money that goes along with it as well. But what did you make of Fury's own personal reasoning for coming back?
Well, he referenced two things. He said one was when he realised what had happened to Anthony Joshua out in Nigeria, how short life is, and that kind of was the final box ticked in his head as to, yes, he's going to come back and he's going to get the most out of life and he's going to do what he enjoys doing. The thing he repeated was that he's coming back because boxing is boring without him. His words were, I'm going to make boxing great again like Donald Trump is making America great again. He said that boxing is boring without Tyson Fury in it, and he has noticed that since he's been sitting back and watching the sport and he's not in it, how much it has declined without him. There isn't another character like Tyson Fury in the sport of boxing, and there is a lot more attention on the sport of boxing with Tyson Fury in it. As I've said, we've already kind of touched on the different types of attention he generates. But I think the thing that I found most interesting was that beneath all the bluster, there was conversation about his trainer. Now, of course, John Fury, his dad, there's been speculation that he will be Tyson's main trainer. Tyson Fury said yesterday that he is not going to have a trainer. He's training himself. He will not have a trainer for this fight. He says, I'm 37 years old now. What I don't know about my own body, what I don't know about my own skill set, I'm never going to know. I don't need someone. So whether that was another Tyson Fury comment that was made on the spur of the moment, the thought that he's going to walk to the ring on his own and not have any people in the corner is nonsensical. He will, of course, have people there, and I suspect there will be someone acting as the head trainer. But Fury at the moment is saying he's going to go it alone, which would suggest that Sugar Hill Stewart won't be involved, which might even suggest Andy Lee won't be involved. I suspect John Fury will be involved, and whether Tyson Fury is aware that saying that John is his trainer after his father's behaviour at the press conference and just thought better of it yesterday, I don't know. But we will see there. And I think that the mood yesterday is that the king has returned. The Gypsy King is back. The fighting man is doing what he needs to do. But I am still far from convinced that at the age of 37, we're going to see a really impressive Tyson Fury. So before all the grand plans are made about fighting the Fabio Wardley Daniel Dubois winner, before we start banging the drum for a third Alexander Usyk fight, and Fury, by the way, said that by the end of this year, Alexander Usyk will be begging him for a third fight because the whole public will want to see it, and that will be what will earn Alexander Usyk the most money. But before we do all that, let's see what he looks like against Makhmudov in April.
And Tyson Fury's own personal politics in the past, let's be fair, in the past have been questionable to say the least. His views on religion and sexuality in particular have been questionable, and all of that has been out there. Matt, what do you make of this Trumpian cheerleading? Is there any hint that this leads us towards thinking Fury might be forging relationships in the future with the likes of Dana White, who's got his big White House UFC bill upcoming with Donald Trump, personal politics, related politics, a lot of canvassing going on, a lot of lobbying going on right now in America with Dana White, Zuffa Boxing, and those that are going to be required to get this kind of Ali Reform Act, Ali demolition bill put through Congress. They've already, I think, got around 8 Democrats signed up as sponsors for that. That's not going to be enough stateside. I sent you an interesting article on that, Matt, just the other day, which highlighted some of that. So they are going to need more from the other side of the house if they're really going to push through. But the first leg's already been done. So any sense that Fury's attaching himself to all of that, or is it just topical Trumpian cheerleading kind of story of the month, and that's Fury's take on it?
I mean, I would be, I suspect that Zuffa is vaguely involved in this fight, in this promotion. It's obviously got, Turki El Sheikh was thanked by everybody again yesterday, even though he wasn't there. The ring were looking after it's a ring event as well as a Queensberry event and everything else, and the ring were obviously looking after the media credentials, hence why someone from Boxing Scene was turned away at the door after a long journey. But in regard to what is coming out of Tyson Fury's mouth, I think he probably does think that he wants to make boxing great again, and he'll think, oh, that's something that Donald Trump said, and that'll do. Whether I doubt very much that much thought has gone into it, as you've just given it there.
So Fury Makhmudov up and running. Fury will be long odds on favourite to win that one, and Fury should win that one. But as Matt said, at his age, after the hard fights he's had, after the careers he's had, not just those two, barnstormers with Usyk, those technical thinking, draining fights with one of the best to do it, but also the wars with Wilder, notwithstanding the years before, out of the ring, the comeback, the punishment he put his body through in and out of the ring prior to that as well, and the longevity of his career, even before you get to all of that. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. So we'll look forward to seeing how all of that unfolds. Wardley Dubois, May the 9th, as we count down to that one in Manchester for a title. Dubois, of course, coming off defeats. You might wonder whether he deserves to go straight into a world title fight, but that's a discussion for alongside this one, Matt. But I suspect, like plenty, are you excited about that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the best matchups you can make in the heavyweight division. So yeah, really pleased they're doing it, and I think it's one of those fights where it wouldn't necessarily need the belt to sell it. But fair play to Fabio Wardley for agreeing to it. Fair play to Daniel Dubois for coming back after the probably quite humbling loss to Alexander Usyk last year, and in his first fight back is fighting Fabio Wardley, who is one of the most informed heavyweights in the division. And this would be my concern if I was in Team Dubois, is just how in form Fabio Wardley is now. I'm not saying he's flawless. He's not. He's looked beatable in probably 3 out of his last 4 fights. But the fact that he got the victories, particularly in his last 2, coming from behind, will only have strengthened that resolve within him, and will only have strengthened that belief in him that he will get the win eventually. And until he loses, he will continue to have that belief. And when you have got that belief, and when you're young and you're strong and you can hit like Fabio Wardley, you're exceptionally dangerous. For Daniel Dubois, he hasn't got that anymore. But what he has shown us in the past is Daniel Dubois can kind of brush off a defeat and kind of come back. Even though you presume that he's mentally weak, he has shown us more than once that he could come back into a tough fight. But I think if you were to ask me right now, without me kind of going in and looking at styles and looking at the different mistakes that they make, if you ask me right now, purely because of who is on the crest of a wave and who kind of crashed and burned last time, I would go with the person who's in form in a fight like this, and that's Fabio Wardley.
I think I would too, but I suppose the questions are, and these are the questions we'll flesh out later on. The two questions I would have, one, can Daniel Dubois just simply outbox Fabio Wardley? He probably could, couldn't he?
Probably. Yeah, I mean that's a possibility. Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. He could probably knock out Fabio Wardley as well, given what he's got in his fists.
Yeah, there's three questions really. That was the second one, and of course he can. And I think the third one would be, could Dubois come through a really hard fight like he did against Jarrell Miller against Fabio Wardley?
Fabio Wardley will give him a much harder fight than Jarrell Miller. If he gets to that point and Wardley can hit Daniel Dubois like Jarrell Miller could hit Dubois, if it's a fight like Dubois-Hrgovic and Wardley can hit Dubois as often as Hrgovic could, then you start to favour. It kind of solidifies the belief that Wardley's the favourite going into this one. Are there any odds yet for this?
You're right, yeah, but the conversation we're having is exactly how the bookies have it. Just Wardley 4-5, so just a shade beyond even money, and Daniel Dubois odds against 6-5. So they're just either side of that even money. What you put on is what you get back plus your stake. So, what we're saying is kind of the way that the bookmakers are leaning. But that's the kind of fight that suddenly in fight week, bit of build up, bit of chat, how they look, how they talk. That's the kind of fight that could easily go the other way. I suspect it'll probably stay that way, and it could even be Wardley gets a slightly shorter favourite. But he's one of those that could swing, for sure. Could definitely swing. So I'm looking forward to that. That's what they call a fun fight, isn't it, Matt? Although with all the pain and violence around, the fun isn't really what it is. But it's what the fans and the media like to call a fun fight. And for sure, that is it. So we look forward to all of that. Just wanted to return to the Figueroa hand wrap controversy. Figueroa, of course, stopping Nick Ball in the last few weeks. I said we would return to that because I couldn't really believe that the British Boxing Board of Control would allow what it was that Figueroa's team were saying to unfold. And I saw a quote from Robert Smith regarding that. He says the situation that has been recorded is that Figueroa's team arrived later than the pre-arranged time with Ball's team and trainer. Ball's trainer had fighters on the bill, so requested to move ahead with the wrapping of hands, which was approved by the WBA supervisor and the board inspector. So there was a representative for the board and the WBA watching the hands being wrapped. This was accepted at the time by Figueroa's team on the night, is the quote from Robert Smith. So you knew there had to be a bit more to it. And it sounds like it kind of the way it unfolded, and they've gone back to that and used it as something to shout about.
Yeah, I mean, that quote was actually delivered to me, and then I published it on Boxing Scene, and then it did the rounds on socials. But yeah, I mean, he said that there wasn't any problem on the night. Like when the situation was explained to them, to Figueroa's team, that look, it was agreed for this time, but you didn't turn up until this time, and they had to get a move on. They're a bit like, oh, okay, but they accepted it, and it was in the post-fight interviews when it all started to kind of spill over a little bit. You'd think, I wasn't thinking there was some skullduggery, but on the article on Boxing Scene, and you get all the comments, about 80%, and bear in mind that the vast majority of people that read the Boxing Scene website are from America. But even about 80% was still like, oh, well, that puts a different light on it. And there was still the others that were like, oh, the cheating little scouser and everything else. But Adam Booth said something as well. He said, look, if you, on the night before the fight like that, you will make it exceptionally clear that this is the time that the hand wrapping is going to start. And if he was in a situation where the other team didn't turn up, he wouldn't think twice about just carrying on at that time, because that is what you agree. And if the boot was on the other foot and he was late into the opposing team, he wouldn't expect them to stop and start again because he couldn't get there on time. Much ado about nothing, I suspect, in the end. And the fact that there were two people, someone from the WBA, someone from the board, watching the hand wrapping take place, would suggest that there was, no foul play there.
No. It also underlines how sometimes you have to follow these things up. It's the equivalent of, Figueroa's team being able to shout and scream about it. It's the equivalent of a front page story in the old days in the tabloids, and then 2 weeks later, a paragraph in page 7 saying, that story we ran and sold millions of copies of, actually it wasn't true. So I think it is important that those things are followed up, because the stink and the noise of the time often way outweighs the truth or the corresponding news further down the line. So I think that's quite important to do so. And hopefully that's washed across to our friends and cousins across the water. And if you're listening stateside or wherever, get in touch with us. Let us know you're a fan of the Opening Bell pod. From afar, we'd love to hear how the boxing stories are spreading across the world if you're a fan of the pod. So get in touch with us. The Opening Bell podcast at gmail.com, or you can get us at Opening Bell on the usual socials as well. Just briefly sticking with the heavyweights. Obviously, there was action at the weekend. Azafa Birla Jagba against Charles Martin. Jai Opataya, of course, is going to fight Brandon Glanton, and he's going to become the first Zuffa boxing champion. They've announced the 8 weights, by the way, for that. So obviously Bam Rodriguez couldn't be a Zuffa world champion because there's no weight for him. So he'd have to go up in weight. So, for example, he'd be excluded from their plans. But I'm interested that obviously Opataya, who's the established guy at cruiserweight, Matt, he's going to be the first to fight for a Zuffa title. Interesting that they didn't put the heavyweight title up for grabs when Jagba and Charles Martin went at it at the weekend, interestingly.
Well, I think we need kind of more explanation as to what they're actually going to do here in terms of their rankings and in terms of a league and in terms of who can qualify for a title shot. There's a part of me that there is a part of me that's really intrigued by how Zuffa Boxing are going to do this. There's another part of me that thinks, is this really the end of the 4-belt era? Or is it just merely the dawn of another title? Yet another title. And you go back and you look at where the IBF began, and the IBF kind of started throwing titles at Larry Holmes, Marvin Hagler, Donald Curry. And all of a sudden they're legitimized and they're validated. And 5 years later, along come the WBO. Probably encouraged somewhat by the ease in IBF's entry into the landscape. And before you know it, you've got this kind of 4-belt era, which everybody who listens to this regularly will know my opinion on it. It has been a horrendous time for boxing because it's just created so much confusion. And then you see Zuffa, who are coming in with grand plans. Now, Dana White is someone that has been a long admirer of the sport at its core level. He has long said, look, boxing is just ripe for takeover. This is years and years and years ago, that if boxing could just get its championship system right, it could present itself in a more organized manner, then there could be a big audience there. And that's what he's promised to do, to come and show everybody how easy it is, to kind of reinvigorate and restaurate the sport. And then you see them, the big announcement last week. This is a big announcement. Everybody needs to listen to Dana White when he does his live post on Instagram. And it is that the first Zuffa boxing champion will be crowned when Jay Apataya fights Clanton. And you're a bit like, oh, really? Really? But boxing fans are nothing if not impatient. Rome wasn't built in a day. So we see what they're going to do here. And some might say, well, hang on a minute. Zuffa boxing is so much more than a sanctioning body. Because it's very easy at the moment to blame the WBC for all the ills in the sport. And the WBC are in the firing line at the moment. And a lot of it is of their own making. But at the same time, you look at that and you're like, well, okay, yeah, their decision to put Conor Benn number 1 at welterweight is insane. But why is nobody asking any questions of the IBF? Why have the IBF got Conor Benn really high up in the welterweight rankings as well? Nobody's going for them. Okay, the WBC's clean boxing program really hasn't worked. But what is everybody else doing? Show us what everybody else is doing. It might appear on the surface the WBC is the only one doing anything. At least they're carrying out tests. So I think we need to wait and see exactly what Zuffa boxing are going to do. And they're obviously coming in. You spoke about the Ali Act. They're not just coming in to create another championship. They are, by their own admission, coming in to completely reinvigorate the sport. But at the moment, for me, for someone who's kind of waited for someone to come along and create something better, when you're singing from the rooftops that Opataya, without doubt, the uniform choice is the best fight in the division, is going to fight someone that you could really make a case isn't even in the top 20 in the world. And you feel like you want to say to Dana White, this is the kind of fight you'd have ridiculed not so long ago before you were involved in the sport. This is the kind of fight that if the WBC were to mandate it, the whole of the industry would be like, what are you doing again, WBC? Yet they're making this fight and telling us it's the start of something great. But as I say, there's only so much they can do in this short space of time. So we wait and see what happens as they move forward.
Reinvigorate's the wrong choice of word, Matt. I disagree with that strongly. Reshape and reform it in their own eyes, in their own images. That's closer to the truth. And the politicking that's going on stateside behind the scenes, particularly with Republicans, with the help of Trump, with a link to Paramount, which includes J.D. Vance, that's big. That is big, significant stuff. And what they're trying to do is change the landscape so they can manipulate the sport in the way that they want to run it. So reinvigorate's the wrong choice of word by a million miles. Maybe one day the sport will be reinvigorated because of it or partly because of it, but that is the wrong choice of word for what it is that these people are doing right now. And politically, in particular, behind the scenes. What it is going to be in the short term is a significantly more fractured sport in the short term. Now, maybe that'll change, but in the short term, it's going to get worse, much worse, for a good period of time.
That might be true. And what you people have often said, or a question that's often asked, or it was asked not so long ago, pre-Turkey Al Sheikh, is how much money would it take for someone to come in and essentially take over the sport? Not just take over a territory, not just take over a broadcaster, but take over the sport. And then people start working out, well, to buy the WBC, to buy the IBF, to buy the WBA, you'd need this much money. And I've always said that would be ridiculous. When a new player comes into market in any industry, they don't then look to buy out all of their rivals. They create something that is a far better product and makes far more sense and provides far more value for money for both the consumer and for those involved in the industry. And this is what I believe Zuffa is starting to do. And it is the baby steps. It's the first steps of what they're trying to do. But I don't believe they're coming in looking to get rid of everyone else. They're coming in to show that what they're doing is by far and away better than anything else, to the point that the interest in what everybody else is doing will start to disintegrate and start to disappear, and they essentially will be the last people left standing because the system that they've got in place will be far superior to anything else. I'm not saying they can do it. I'm not saying they can do it, but that is what I believe we will start to see happen.
And that's going to take time. That's going to take time. There's going to be a lot of fracture and discomfort for many of us in the short term, for sure. That is That is absolutely the case. So we watch with interest. It is going to be funky and fascinating and infuriating, but already we're seeing what we had 10 years ago in this country, Matt. You've Eddie Hearn having a dig at Dana White calling out the silver spoon to Eddie Hearn, quote unquote, and the stuff that was going on between Hearn and Warren years ago is now what we're going to see with them, and there'll be other people involved in it as well. So yeah, pretty tedious, pretty tiresome, but unfortunately it's serious stuff, and particularly all that politicking that's going on. This is big stuff. These are big stories, and we will try and report it as best we can, which is something Neil Dempsey was asking me when I bumped into him. Fan of the pod, subscriber to Apple Plus. He was working in one of the corners down at Brentwood at the weekend. I went down to watch a show there. If you get a chance and you're a DAZN subscriber, watch the Ross Driscoll-Toomey Phillips fight. It was for a sort of step towards a Commonwealth title at lightweight between the pair of them. That was an absolute humdinger from start to finish. They just, not necessarily any sort of knockdowns and fighters getting hurt and staggering, but just for intense fighting from start to finish over 10 rounds. That Ross Driscoll-Toomey Phillips fight was a cracker. And Megan Redstall and both Lily Winch came back to win. Fighters, both good talents. Look out for them. Redstall won the Commonwealth title at bantamweight, and Lily Winch is one of the sort of best young female talents in the sport right now in the UK. So she came back after a difficult time, hand problems, and a long hiatus. But Neil was asking me, as well as saying, thanks for the pod, keep up the good work. He was hoping that one day you were going to tell us your boxing news story, Matt.
What boxing news story is that? I've got thousands of boxing news stories.
Your boxing news history. Your boxing news history. Maybe we'll do a bonus pod on that.
Yeah, I think I'd have no qualms. I think, I think this, and I say what I get asked the most. Believe me, when I say I get, I've been asked it about 4 times. But it's why did you leave in the end? Yeah. And I'd be happy to talk about that.
Okay, Neil, we'll do that for you. And a reminder that you can subscribe to Apple Plus or the Patreon for less than $5 a month. That's pretty much a coffee, less than a pint, once a month. And you will get early release of the pod, interaction with us as well, particularly on Patreon, bonus pods, etc., etc., etc. But also you just help the pod to deliver each and every week. And with that in mind, thanks to NAS Medical as well. NAS Medical, who sponsor the pod, help us do our stuff. They specialize in complete medical coverage for boxing events in particular. That includes Fight Night, ringside medical care, ringside medicine training courses as well, expert second opinions on all aspects of boxing-related medical matters. To find out about that, you can find them on Instagram at NAS Medical Limited or online nasmedical.co.uk. Boxer safety is their priority. So thanks to them for powering the pod as we build up to this week. Wood Warrington, 37 and 35 years old, out of the ring for 9 and 10 months respectively. What is it? 17 months? Beyond that, back to the autumn of 2023, Matt, when they had that stirring fight, which Josh Warrington was in front by 4 points on 2 of the 3 scorecards. Looked like he was running away with it. Looked like Leigh Wood was in trouble. And then Wood's power got him back in the fight and took Warrington out of it. Of course, notwithstanding the controversy of Warrington thinking he could have carried on, but unfortunately, either bad choice, poor decision making, or disorientated and didn't know what he was doing and faced the wrong way. Back to the referee. Referee had no option, counted him out, and that was that. Those some of the stories, the subplots, and the background to Wood Warrington 2, a couple of years on, 2+ years on. Did you see the Matchroom promo for it?
Yeah, it's
Wood
good.
Warrington,
It was good.
Wood Warrington,
Yeah.
a few years on, not getting the fight. It was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, they are good at things like that. This fight, if it had been made, say, 5-6 months after the first one, I think it would have been far easier to kind of make a call on who you think is going to win. I think at this point, if anyone tells me they're certain on the outcome, I'd be questioning their logic on it. I think it's just pure guesswork on who wins this one at this stage of their careers. But given the drama of the finish and the contentiousness of the finish first time round, and how exciting the fight was prior to the finish, I think this has got the makings of a good fight. But they're both older. Neither man really has had any positive form coming into it. Wood has been incredibly inactive, really, all things considered. Josh Warrington's got his own theories on why for that, which we won't talk about on the podcast for legal reasons. But it's, I think it's really, really hard to call, exceptionally hard to call on who's going to win this fight.
I suppose the questions are, Matt, what wears most for fighters at the stage of their careers with the careers that they've had? Is Wood's punching power always going to be in play and therefore always going to be the fight decider? Or is maybe Warrington's style and pressure technique, does that give him an edge? Are those the two things at play? Or are there simply too many doubts surrounding both them at this stage of their career to have any clue?
Yeah, I think there's something that Wood won't have lost is his power. Whether he will have lost a second or two with reflexes and everything else and be able to detonate the power as effectively as he used to is another question. Warrington isn't the kind of swarming fighter that he used to be, but I think if I had to make a pick, it probably would be Warrington, because he's been a bit more active, because he's got a victory under his belt. As they have said this week, Josh has got a genuine bee in his bonnet about Leigh Wood, about how the last one finished, about what Leigh Wood has said since, about some of the things that Josh Warrington believes has gone on behind the scenes. I would just about lean towards Josh Warrington, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Leigh Wood just proved to have the superior power when it mattered. And if Warrington at this stage of his career, his punch resistance has faded somewhat, his own reflexes have gone somewhat, and he leaves himself open to a big shot from Leigh Wood. But Leigh Wood didn't look great in his last fight. Signs of wear and tear, signs of his age. And I don't really think he looked great in the first fight a few years ago for large portions of it until he produced the finish. So with all of that in mind, I would, purely because we always make a call on this, or I always make a call when the fights come in, and therefore I feel like I've got to, I would probably say Josh Warrington win this one on points, but far from convinced.
Yeah, I'd lean towards Warrington as well, actually, for many of the same reasons that you've just said. The other thing that I would just add in, and obviously the different fights, the defeats to Kakachi and Lara initially for Leigh Wood. Let's not forget the corner stepped in intelligently, sensitively in both of those occasions as well. So that's just something that I think with Leigh Wood is potentially at play at this stage of his career as well. And there is just the possibility that they are two fighters, and although the fire still burns brightly, actually the coals in the engine are fewer and far between, and therefore it might actually simmer rather than come to the boil. And that kind of fight, I think, would favour Josh Warrington just to box and box. And I think he might just be a little, as much as he's fired up and he's whipped himself into great shape and he's motivated, they don't like each other, and there is that little bit of enmity and spark between them, and that always sells, and that always helps. It might be actually that we don't see all of that in the fight itself, and I think that might help Warrington too, just to be a little bit controlled. So yeah, like you, I'm leaning towards Warrington to win it, probably on points. Although I think the spectre of one, if not both of them, being diminished versions of themselves is also at play, and therefore there's always the scope for a bit of chaos when that's the case. So there is just the potential for a joker and something a little bit funky to happen in this one. But no, I'm leaning towards Warrington, probably on points like you.
Yeah, who's the favourite?
Leigh Wood, just again, it's like Wardley, Dubois. They're both just sort of the other side of even money. Wood the favourite. Warrington odds against. Warrington's 5-2 to win on points. By the way, 5-1 for the stoppage. Leigh Wood 8-5 to win by stoppage, I think, rather than points. So Warrington points, Leigh Wood stoppage. Those are the preferred routes in terms of the betting. And on the undercard, Leo Tang's in action. Dave Allen comes back. Sandy Ryan fights for a title. She's coming back to £140. Ishmael Davis taking on Bilal Fawaz as well. Bilal's done really well against Junaid Boston, hasn't he, to earn himself the tilt, but Davis has got the stronger form lines. They're a big unit, isn't he, Davis? And having gone close and in good fights against Josh Kelly and Ajarko, and having beaten Sam Gilly last time up, albeit narrowly, Ishmael Davis is a strong favourite for that one. At the weekend, Richardson Hitchens in action stateside as well. Matty takes on Oscar Duarte. Hitchens looks so good against Cambosis that he's a favourite and a heavy favourite for that one. And Barrios Garcia is a fight that you sort of think a few years ago you'd have really fancied Ryan Garcia to win, but that defeat to Rolly Romero, that really does throw a spanner in the works, doesn't it? That really does just have you pausing for thought and breath. And, you know, I hate talking about Garcia anyway, to be honest. I've got a bee in my bonnet about that. So, you know, I'm struggling to get up for that.
Yeah, it's not often I agree with Conor Benn, actually. I mean, he's released a few. I mean, he's prolific on social media at the moment, Conor Benn. And one of them was very angry that he's convinced that Mario Barrios wins that fight. A more recent one is not so angry, a little more reserved. But yeah, you kind of can see why people are thinking that Barrios might win this fight. There's a lot of bad feeling about Ryan Garcia at the moment. You feel like he hasn't done himself any favours. Eric Raskin, who I mentioned quite a lot, top columnist in boxing. He writes 2 columns a week for Boxing Scene, and he did one. He today's column actually is an interview with Joe Goosen, which is really interesting, where he talks about Ryan Garcia and what a complicated character Ryan Garcia is. He also talks about what a good fighter Ryan Garcia is, and of course Goosen is now training Barrios for this fight, something that Garcia claimed to have taken to his heart at the press conference a few weeks ago. But another one of Eric's pieces a few weeks ago is, at what point can we just say that Ryan Garcia is a jerk instead of falling back on, well, he's obviously got mental health issues. And he spoke to a psychologist and saying a lot of Ryan Garcia's behaviour isn't a consequence of mental health. When he's at his most poisonous and vicious, that's him wanting to be poisonous and vicious. But, you know, I know the reason why you've got a bee in your bonnet, same way as I've got a bee in my bonnet, is probably the fact that he was, you know, he failed drug tests and comes back and he's just being rewarded with big fight after big fight, even though he's losing the big fights. He's a good boxer, Ryan Garcia. He can hit really hard. His left hook in particular is probably his honey punch. But he can bang with his right. And when he's in full flow, he can look really impressive. I thought for going back to the Luke Campbell fight, I remember thinking, crikey, he's a lot better all round than I thought he was, watching him against Luke Campbell. The fight against Devin Haney when he came in overweight and with illegal substances in his system. Quite rightly, that has been made a no contest retrospectively. But even in that fight, he surprised me. You know, he hurt Devin Haney like no one had hurt Devin Haney. He hit Devin Haney like no one has hit Devin Haney before or since. And Barrios, as we have said several times on this podcast, is at a good level, but he's not elite. He doesn't look elite. He looks beatable. He's a beatable champion. There's a reason why Conor Benn keeps calling his name, is because he's probably the most beatable of the welterweight titleists out there. Then you throw in he's coming off 2 draws, which is very unusual. The most recent one, of course, was against the ancient Manny Pacquiao, where everybody was fearful of Pacquiao's health going in. And then by the end of the 12 rounds, several observers think Pacquiao was very unfortunate not to get the nod on that night. And you think, well, against a young man like Ryan Garcia, a young, capable, explosive man like Ryan Garcia, then Barrios might come unstuck. But again, I'm far from convinced that Ryan Garcia has got the psychological makeup and that he's consistent enough physically to win this fight. But I can understand why he would be the favourite.
And quite a heavy one. Barrios 7-4, by the way. He might well be the bet, Barrios. I'd find it difficult to put the money down just because, as you say, Barrios just looks so beatable. He looks so beatable that I sort of think, really? Can I be punting this guy against a quick fighter like Garcia? But then you look at the knockdown Garcia suffered against Rolly Romero, and you just think that was sheer laziness, and it was so easy. And you just think, wow, that guy and all of the stuff that goes along with him. And Barrios had that tough fight with Ramos, didn't he? Where he was down, hurt, found a way. He was really good and tough down the stretch. And you think, well, that's what's required against someone like Garcia. So we'll see. I don't know what to expect. I mean, Barrios should get beat, but I sort of hope he might beat Garcia. Don't know what Conor Benn's thinking, which would be the better fight for him. Barrios, if you want to win a world title, Ryan Garcia, if you want to make pots of money. But again, I don't really want to have Conor Benn's name in my mouth either at this stage. So it's a pretty unpalatable discussion, full stop, that one. So we'll move on. We'll move on. Let's move on to something we'd rather talk about. And that's this week. Yes, this week we take you back to the Valentine's weekend, 1987 in Regina, Canada. 7,000 fans came out at the Agrodome to see the local hero, the talented Olympian Willie de Witt, who was unbeaten in 16 with 12 knockouts, up against Smokin Bert Cooper, who had one stoppage defeat a year previously, but had beaten another Olympian, Henry Tillman, previously, knocked out 3 of his last 5. He'd appeared on CBS television previously, so he was starting to get a bit of a name and a reputation. At the age of sort of 2021, Smokin Bert Cooper was hot property, but this was the fight, a crossroads fight against who might be the next star, who might be the next contender, who was the would-be champion, Matt. There was a lot at play and a lot at stake.
Yeah, you look back on it now, don't you? And you think, what were Willie de Witt's team thinking making this match for him? Willie de Witt was a good amateur, silver medalist at the 1984 Olympics. He'd lost the gold medal match to Henry Tillman, but prior to that, he'd beat Tillman twice, including with a first-round knockout. He had run Francesco Damiani close, who was another who was very, very good amateur, would turn out to be a good professional. So Willie de Witt had good pedigree, started out playing hockey, as he says in an interview beforehand, doesn't he? Pretty much everybody in Canada is playing hockey, but I fell out of love with the team sport, so I went into boxing, started boxing at the age of 17. But he was fairly highly regarded. I mean, let's not overstate it. He was not being picked by everybody to go on and rule the world, but he was fairly highly regarded going into this fight. Bert Cooper in the away corner, 20 years old, 21 a few months after this. He had lost to Reggie Gross the year before, and the nature of his defeat had annoyed his trainer, Joe Frazier. I think he would claim he'd get a thumb in the eye. It was an uppercut that landed, and Cooper just turned around and almost did a no-mass in the middle of the fight against Reggie Gross. Said, I can't continue, can't see, don't want to continue. Frazier was frustrated, and Cooper was put back in really tough as a cruiserweight at the age of 20. Henry Tillman, the aforementioned gold medalist, Cooper came through a really tough fight, really, really, really good fight that that impressed a lot of onlookers. Tillman was expected to win that. He came through that. And in the fight after that, he would fight Tyrone Booz. Cooper would win a split decision. Tyrone Booz would go on to win a WBO belt in the following decade. So he was in good company, but it was still thought that it was going to be a really difficult night with someone of the dimensions and the power and the boxing ability of Willie de Witt. Cooper was a revelation. Old Smokin Bert looked sensational on this night, didn't he? And did you like how the broadcast began with Happy Valentine's Day to our ladies? Like,
Yes.
wow.
How many of them were watching heavyweight boxing in the 80s? Hopefully a few. But yeah, more now for sure. But yeah, Valentine's weekend. And it wasn't love but violence that was in the air for Smokin Bert Cooper. Young, fresh face, a little bit heavier, more thick-set Matt. He'd put it on sort of 10 to 14 pounds since the last time that TV viewers had seen him.
Yeah, well, he was down campaigning at cruiserweight, so he was around 194, 195 pounds. But as many people were at this point, they have quickly recognised that there is a supersonic star in the sport. And Cooper had been calling out Mike Tyson, and they knew each other, Bert Cooper and Mike Tyson. And Tyson apparently turned around and said, "Coop, if you come up to heavyweight, I'll give you a fight." So that's what Cooper did. He talks about kind of how he'd enjoyed putting the weight on. He was 209 pounds for this one. After the fight, he said, "My optimum might be about 215. I want to keep putting more on. I feel more powerful." But he did, and what I really like, what you could, if you've seen Joe Frazier fight and then you see Bert Cooper, how Frazier has molded Bert Cooper into a version of himself is incredible. Now, I'm not saying Bert Cooper was as good as Joe Frazier. I'm not. I love Bert Cooper. Everybody knows I love Bert Cooper. But goodness me, he did an awfully convincing impression of Joe Frazier in a way that many fighters would not be able to do that. And Cooper, in full flow in this fight, he does bring Joe Frazier to mind. And at this particular point in history, even though Mike Tyson had only had one world title fight in February 1987, that was the night when he'd stopped Trevor Berbick, turned Berbick's legs to spaghetti. And then we were told, we have a new era in boxing. But even at this stage, people are already thinking, who on earth is going to fight Mike Tyson? We need to start creating some kind of rivals for Mike Tyson. And following this victory for Bert Cooper's name was one of them. There was another American heavyweight on the way up. He was called Mike Williams. He was a body beautiful. He would win the Ring Magazine Prospect of the Year for 1987. But the likes of Mike Williams, Bert Cooper, and even Gary Mason, who was in the early stages of his career, but he was starting to knock out some American opponents. They were the three that were kind of, or perhaps they could be real fierce rivals for Mike Tyson in the future. But you can see why when you look at Bert Cooper in this fight.
And you can see why previous to this fight, in the build-up to the matchup, people would have thought that Willie de Witt was impressive, quite fast hands, lovely left hook to the body. Shows if you look at footage of de Witt before this night, throws a fantastic wicked left hook to the body. You could see why people could take little clips, watch little montages and think Bert Cooper coming forward, smaller fighter coming up in weight, that de Witt was all wrong for him and that was going to give him a ton of problems. But ultimately it was the other way around, wasn't it, Matt? Right from the get-go, Bert Cooper on the front foot, hitting hard. He was intense, fired up. You could see at the face-off in the middle of the ring, Cooper sort of really heaving breath, like cheeks blowing and exhaling. He was so fired up for this.
Smokin Bert was ready for an explosion on this night. He really believed in it. I like the line that he gave when they said he beforehand, and the commentary team relayed what Bert Cooper had said, and they said, "Are you worried about the officials? You worried about this might be some home cooking in Canada?" Cooper just turned up, put his two fists in the air, and just went, "These are my officials. These are my officials. This is all I need to worry about." And he repeated that post-fight. But yeah, first round, I mean, the right hand lands that when you're watching it in real time, doesn't appear to be the kind of shot that would have the reaction that it did. Willie de Witt is very, very fortunate to kind of get to his feet, or not fortunate given what transpired. But then the finish, the finish in the second round, the two-fisted assault from Bert Cooper and how accurate each of those shots were, spoke of a fighter who was going places. Never quite got there though, did he?
No, he didn't. But then what transpired out of the ring probably had a serious impact on that. Down twice in the first round. The first one a minute and a half or so in, a short right hand really catches de Witt, and down he goes. And then right on the bell, he catches him with a left hook and then a right hand. And his legs, Matt, de Witt's legs just go, doesn't he? He looks really sort of spindly and disorganized and unbalanced and discombobulated. But that is right on the bell, so he's got enough time to get back up, walk across to his corner. But there's kind of more of the same coming in the second round. A jab and then a right hand puts him down, and then there's just a filthy, violent barrage where he's in a corner, stuck in a corner, de Witt, and there's just an absolute sequence of hard shots, and his nose is in an absolute state at the end of it. I mean, the blood is actually dripping out as though it's on draft.
His nose is in a horrendous state. You kind of see him on the canvas, and it's right at the end of the second round, isn't it? And you hear the bell sound, but the counter's already started, and you almost sense that de Witt is not completely out of it. He's giving some thought about whether he really wants to get up or not. He kind of makes a late surge when the count is 9 to appear to beat the count. But then you look at his face, and his nose is kind of just ruptured. There's blood all over his gloves, and yeah, he's in a mess. He'd felt the force of Smokin Bert, and he didn't want any more. And who could blame him?
Yeah, who could blame him? Indeed. This was in the February of 1987. 4 months later, de Witt's dad Len, his younger brother Theo, they'd die in a plane crash. Just a few months after this, de Witt himself would go on to train as a lawyer and end up to this day quite high up in the Canadian legal system, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a success story. Willie de Witt got out of the sport at the right time. He did go on and have, I think he had 4 or 5 fights after this, all victories, 1 or 2 against okay opposition that suggested he was kind of around top 30 in the world level, but he walked away from the sport, and yeah, thought his brain would be put to much better use elsewhere. And
Smokin Bert wouldn't capitalize on this media exposure, the TV coverage with CBS. Post-fight, they're asking about Mike Tyson. You know, that seems like it could be a possibility in the next few years. But the next few years would bring him knockout wins. But his next fight, I think, again on CBS, would be a defeat to Carl Williams. He'd lose again to Everett Martin, Nate Miller, and then George Foreman as well. All of those defeats coming in the next couple of years. So everything would change quite notably. How do you reflect on that period? What could have, what couldn't have been, and also the story of Bert Cooper, which was one of sort of drug dependency out of the ring as well?
Well, you know, he was, even around this time of beating Willie de Witt, there was stories about Bert Cooper was, yeah, he had a taste. He had a taste for certain substances, and he could control it for a while. I think he went into the Carl Williams fight as a narrow favourite, and Carl Williams, and hopefully I use the word correctly this time, reinvigorated his career with victory over with Bert Cooper. But that was a fight where Cooper was expected to win that, yet Carl Williams was the one that won it, and Cooper went into that, as far as I'm aware, as far as all my research has told me, fully trained, completely dedicated. But it wasn't long then before Joe Frazier started to hear more and more about what Bert was doing. And he didn't want any part of Bert Cooper if Bert Cooper essentially was taking drugs. Their relationship ended, and I think that really sent Cooper into a bit of a tailspin. He viewed Joe as kind of a father figure, idolized him. He was well within that family. He was close to Marvis. And then his career kind of went on a different path. think the loss to Everett Martin when he tried to go back down to cruiserweight was a bit of a surprise. By the time he was fighting George Foreman in 1989, Cooper was lost. It's a well-told story that he spent 3 or 4 days in the build-up to the George Foreman fight with prostitutes, with an insane amount of drugs to get him through those days. And then he went into a George Foreman fight and he lost. He managed to get himself back together for a period of time, though, didn't he, Smokin Bert? He got a victory over Joe Hipp, who was fairly well regarded at the time. Holyfield was supposed to fight Mike Tyson. That didn't happen. Francesco Damiani came in at the last minute. That didn't happen. And then Bert Cooper was presented with this shot at Evander Holyfield with just days' notice. And he became the first to drop Holyfield, or the first person to instigate a count over Evander Holyfield. And briefly, he was back in the top 10 in the world, Bert Cooper. But it was a short little flirtation with the top.
Yeah, 91-92, the Holyfield and Moorer fights, although defeats, he had both of them on the canvas, and those are almost the career highlights, as well as maybe this night for Bert Cooper, who would go on to fight until 2012, can you believe? And stopped 15 times from the late 80s on until 2012. He'd actually die in 2019, Matt, at the age of 53 from pancreatic cancer. So he'd fight well on too late into his 40s. Did you get any sort of bulletins or stories about Cooper sort of towards the end or after boxing?
No, I mean, Tris Dixon used to speak to him. And I think in the end, I think it was about 2 years before his death when he realised he was in ill health. I think he was a little bit punchy by then as well. And one of the biggest regrets that I've got, really, and I don't have many regrets, but one of the biggest regrets that I've got is that I was in New York and I landed in New York the day before his funeral. And I think it would have been about 2.5, 3 hour train journey down to where his funeral was. And I remember waking up in the morning, I was so jet lagged. And I just thought, I don't even know if I'm going to be welcome. And I didn't go. And I regret it now. I do regret not going now, not just getting my arse out of bed and making the trip. And people do say, what is so special about Bert Cooper? He wasn't really. It was more about the potential. It was the thrilling fights that I remember at a certain age. The way that he fought, the excitement that I remember feeling around this point for when he'd beaten Willie de Witt, and the excitement that I had about Mike Tyson and the thought of the two of them fighting and what have you. But Cooper's story is just so dark, with the odd little highlight within it. I hate to say there's something about it that greatly appeals to me.
Whenever we talk about Smokin Bert Cooper, whenever we talk about this particular period, in the heavyweight division, essentially, but boxing anyway, it always makes me want to go back and read that Years of the Locust book.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even mentioned
what a book that is. It's just
we haven't even mentioned his
dirty
promoter.
and say again.
We haven't even mentioned his promoter, old Rick Parker.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that in itself is insane. And why that book isn't more people have read it, more people are familiar with it, I don't know. But to me, it's right up there, top 3 boxing books of all time. So if you haven't read that and you want a bit more information on the insane life of Smokin Bert, get your hands on that book.
And the grimery of boxing around that time, the matches, the changing of names, the payments, the non-payments. Yeah, John Houghton's book, The Year of the Locust, it is a worldie. It's an absolute worldie. Get a copy of that if you can. And Smokin Bert is sort of part of that story, of those stories. And while you do that, we'll be preparing for next week. Enjoy the fights. We'll speak to you soon. This week on the Opening Bell Pod, it's all about the heavyweights. Fury returning against Makhmudov. This week on the Opening Bell, it's all about the heavies. Fury returning against Makhmudov. Why is he back? Matt Christie talking about that, as well as Dubois taking on Fabio Wardley. This week in history, we talk about smoking Bert Cooper taking on another prospect back in the 80s, the night that he announced himself to American television viewers. And two aging warriors go at it this weekend. Wood Warrington, 2.5 years on. Will we get the thrills and spills again? Plus all the news lines, all of that on the usual platforms. It's the opening bell.